Well, hello, and welcome to the Coachella Valley Water District. My name is Kevin Hemp. I'm an education specialist here. And today we have a presentation for you that I hope you enjoy. We've called it Water 101. It is a summary of CVWD and water in the Coachella Valley. And it runs about 45 minutes long. And so we'll go ahead and jump right into it. And basically, it's a highlight of CBWD and the workings and resources of the water district. So let's start off with our story. So now, since you're probably, well, you are viewing this online, it may well be that you are presently halfway around the world and are unfamiliar with not only who we are, but where we are. So let's start with our location. The Coachella Valley Water District is located in, you guessed it, the Coachella Valley. Now, the Coachella Valley is located in the United States in southeastern California in the Colorado Desert, which happens to be a very dry region. In fact, one of the driest regions in the world. We only receive an average rainfall of about 3 inches per year. And if you're curious about the name Colorado Desert, that actually comes from the fact that we are actually an extension or connected to the Colorado River's main delta, which is in fact 160 miles south of here. We have evidence of that connection today in the form of the Salton Sea, pictured here, which was formed about 100 years ago. So that's the region that we serve, this area here. So you may ask, well, what is it like to live in the Coachella Valley? Well, surrounding cities boast that skies are sunny 360 days out of the year. The wintertime, or the season as the locals call it, runs roughly from mid-October to mid-April and is actually quite pleasant with an average temperature of about 73 degrees. However, if you're unfortunate to live here in the summertime, it's quite severe, very hot. Without air-conditioned shelter, the climate is virtually unbearable with temperatures easily reaching 120 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. So that's kind of what it's like living here. The two major industries that drive the local economy are farming and golf. It used to be a saying that agriculture was king in the Coachella Valley, but that's kind of been overshadowed by golf. We typically call it golf, but what we're really talking about is an overall resort / vacation lifestyle. We also call it the hospitality industry. So these are the two main drivers of the economy here. As far as climate, it's been determined that this area and the soils of the Coachella Valley are most like Algeria in North Africa. So when you think Coachella Valley, think Sahara Desert. Think Sahara Desert dry, Sahara Desert hot. It's essentially the same climate. It's probably because of that one of our main agricultural exports is dates. Originally imported from Algeria in 1903. In fact, it's been estimated about 85% of all dates grown in the United States are grown right here in the Coachella Valley. Okay, let's jump into the water district itself. About CVWD. CVWD is a public nonprofit water agency that was voted into existence on January 9th, 1918 under the authority of California's County Water Act. The final voting tally to create this district was 324 to 49. Now, it turns out that even though this region is very dry, there is an abundance of water beneath the desert floor held in reserve in a vast aquifer. And this water in the eastern portion of the valley is what we call, it's of artesian quality. In the early days, which would be the late 1800s, early 1900s, the Southern Pacific Railroad and others, mainly farmers, tapped this supply by drilling deep wells. They drilled the wells and up came the water. And you can see a picture of that here in this photo. This is a photo of a pioneering farming family in 1912 in the eastern portion of the Coachella Valley. they actually drilled a deep well, and up came the water. And in this case, the water is flowing about 8 feet out of the ground. By 1906, there were 300 of these free-flowing artesian wells in the Coachella Valley, irrigating about 4,000 acres of land. And by 1915, most of those wells had stopped flowing. In addition to this, reports were being circulated around the valley that investors from Los Angeles were seeking to file water rights on water in the Coachella Valley and actually export that water south to be sold as a source of drinking water. So the fact that the water table was dropping and the threat to the water being exported scared a lot of people here, made them very nervous, and consequently the locals banded together and voted the Coachella Valley Water District into existence to address those problems. So before continue on with that, let's take a closer look at this aquifer that we're sitting on top of here in the Coachella Valley. The Coachella Valley Groundwater Basin, as we often call it, is it's about 45 miles long, and it's roughly 15 miles wide. And this aquifer that lies beneath the valley floor, it's good to know it's not some mysterious underground lake, but rather, for the sake of comparison, we sometimes say that it's analogous to a huge bathtub filled with sand, gravel, and clay, and it's tilted up on one end and filled with water. So if you can picture that, that's kind of what the Coachella Valley Groundwater Basin is like. So the high point of the aquifer actually is in the area we call the West Valley at the San Gorgonio Pass, and that sits at about 1,600 feet above sea level. And then the low part of the valley would be here. That would be the surface of the Salton Sea, which is actually below sea level. It's like minus 232 feet below sea level. So again, looking at the valley here, the groundwater basin and the valley itself has been divided into two major sections that we typically call the West Valley and the East Valley. And you see a red dividing line here separating the two. If you live in the valley, you may be familiar with a street called Washington Street, and the red line would represent Washington Street. So basically, if you drive along Washington Street, on the west side of Washington Street is the West Valley, on the east side is the East Valley. So why the distinction? Why even bother? Well, it turns out it's a geologic division, and if you were to look at the East Valley about 400 years ago, the East Valley, which sits mainly below sea level, was full of water. It was sitting under a huge lake that we commonly call ancient, sometimes old, ancient Lake Cahuilla. And this ancient lake was created by the Colorado River when the river flipped, jumped its primary channel, and flowed north, and then filled the Coachella Valley all the way up to Washington Street. To put this in perspective, I have a map here that maybe shows this a little more clearly. But you can see the turning of the Colorado River and the filling of the Coachella Valley and the valleys below it. And you can see the red line there, it says East Valley, that would be Washington Street. And ancient Lake Cahuilla, if you measure, is about 110 miles long. It was about 40 miles wide at its widest point. At its deepest, it was about 300 feet deep. And you notice on this map, I also left the Salton Sea in there just for comparison. Ancient Lake Cahuilla was about 6 times larger than today's Salton Sea. We still have some remnants of the old lake here in the valley today to remind us that the water was here. Probably one of the more prominent reminders is the ancient water line. We often call it just the bathtub ring. And you can see a very distinct line on the mountains that surround the valley here. That's the quote bathtub ring, the high water mark, the water line when the lake was here. This picture in particular was taken at a place called Travertine Point, which is in the East Valley. It's actually down by the Salton Sea. And if you were to look at the line, if you had to guess, we'd probably say, oh, well, that must be sea level. That's how high the ocean is. But in fact, this line is about 40 feet above sea level. It turns out that down in Mexico, there's a set of mountains down there, I believe, called the Sierra Prieto Mountains, which actually served as a natural dam that held this water in and up to 40 feet above sea level. As the Colorado River continued to flow in and the water continued to rise, it eventually spilled over, pushed the river south again, left the lake high and dry, and eventually the whole thing just evaporated. It just disappeared. But we do have the line to remind us that it was here. One of the other reminders or indicators that this lake was here, if you happen to dig around in the sand of the East Valley, you'll find shells here. And it turns out that these are, in fact, freshwater snail shells. And I guess you could call it an indicator species in the sense that it tells us what type of water actually seeped into the aquifer. The good news is it was fresh water from the Colorado River. Just a little fun fact, it's, Coachella Valley, interesting name. A lot of people are curious as to how the Coachella Valley got its name. There's several stories circulating around, but nobody could really come to a consensus as to how the Coachella Valley actually got its name. One of the more popular stories is connected to these little shells. It turns out that in 1823, there was a Spanish captain that blazed a trail from Arizona to Los Angeles area. And the trail that he was traveling, that he was creating through the Coachella Valley, he noticed that the valley or portions of it were scattered with millions of these tiny little shells. And so he named it in Spanish, Valle de los Conchillas. Forgive me, I don't speak Spanish, I just pretend to. So if I butchered that, I apologize. But essentially translated into English, that means Valley of the Little Shells. And I guess the word we like to focus on here is conchillas. The root word for little shell is conchilla. And if you look at the word conchilla and Coachella, very similar. And people argue that the Valley of the Little Shells into Coachella, Valley of Coachella, was actually a mistranslation over time. And so that's never been proven, but it's a good story. So anyway, take it for what it is. Coachella could be linked to conchilla, little shell. Okay. Continuing on with the aquifer. So if we could look at a cross section of our aquifer, we think this is what it would look like. You see on this cross section, you see West Valley, you see East Valley, dividing line there. First, I'd like to point out again the downward slope of the valley from the west to the east, from 1,600 feet down to below 200 feet, below sea level. The second thing I'd like to point out on our cross-section map here is this number 39 MAF. MAF stands for million acre feet, so we have estimated storage of 39 million acre feet of water in our aquifer down to the first 1,000 feet. Now, if you're unfamiliar with that term, acre feet, it's a common term that we use in the water business, and basically it refers to how much water will flood 1 acre of land to 1 foot deep. So 1 acre foot flooded to 1 foot deep, that's 1 acre foot. And if you're not familiar with the size of an acre of land is roughly the size of a football field. So think football field flooded with water to 1 foot deep. There you go, 1 acre foot of water. If you measure that in gallons, we round it off to about 326,000 gallons of water. And we have 39 million of those units in the aquifer here, just down to the first 1,000 feet. We have a saying that we typically use. It's the 1-1-1 saying. It's 1 acre foot will provide 1 family, that's 4 people, for 1 year of water supply. So 1 acre foot for 1 family for 1 year. More and more it's getting harder to say that because families in the Coachella Valley for the last 10 years have been dramatically cutting back on their water use. They've been conserving water in a great way. So, that's good. But families in the Coachella Valley typically now are using about 22% less than historically. So but we still, it's a good indicator. 1 acre foot for one family for 1 year. 39 million acre feet of storage down to the first 1,000 feet. Now, if you go below that, there's another 1,000 feet of fresh water below that, and we haven't estimated storage below that. And then if you measure the entire column of our aquifer, roughly from the surface of the ground down to bedrock, it's an astounding 2.27 miles deep. That's 12,000 feet deep down to bedrock. So there's a lot of water in this aquifer. And because we have so much water in the aquifer, it's kind of tempting to say, wow, there's enough water there for many, many generations. We don't have to worry about conserving it. Now, that is not true. We do have to worry about conservation. We do have a Coachella Valley Water Management Plan it's our rule book, our operations manual that guides us on how to properly manage this water resource. Basically, we look at the aquifer as we say it's not a mineral to be mined, it's a resource to be managed. And so that's the way we approach it. Okay, so continuing on, again, there's the dividing line between West Valley and East Valley. And I don't think I mentioned this, but the geologic division, I mentioned the lake, but it was actually the lake bed that you can see here in the form of clay that's present in the East Valley that's not present in the West Valley. We call it an aquitard because it slows the movement of water through it. And so this aquitard has water sitting on top of it, and it has a confined aquifer, a pressurized aquifer below it. And this clay layer actually was formed when ancient Lake Cahuilla was here. So if you remember, Lake Cahuilla was formed by the Colorado River, and the Colorado River is a very muddy river. And so the silt and the clay that was in the lake settled to the bottom and created this waterproof clay layer. And so because of that, water flowing from the west side of the valley to the east side, some of that water actually makes it under the clay layer, and it's actually pushing up against the clay. And it was the railroads that first drilled through that clay and brought up that artesian water. And so that's the same artesian water we saw initially in our picture here. Okay, so that's our aquifer. Let's continue on a little bit more with our district, Coachella Valley Water District. So we were voted into existence to do two things, which we're still responsible for today. We were mainly voted into existence, one, to conserve the valley's groundwater supply, and two, to seek supplemental sources. So part of the water management plan is always will be conservation, trying to figure out how to do more with less, and when possible, bring in more water to support growth. And so if you like mission statements, here's our mission statement. It says, to meet the water-related needs of the people through dedicated employees providing high-quality water at a reasonable cost. CBWD, when it comes to water agencies, is unique among water agencies in that we're considered what's called a multifaceted agency, meaning we do many things. Most water agencies typically are responsible for just one type of operation. Most public water agencies are either stormwater districts or sanitation districts or irrigation districts. So the Coachella Valley Water District is all of those and more. We actually are responsible for 7 areas of service. And here they are, and I'll just read through them. Our 7 areas of service, we're responsible for providing domestic water. We also are responsible for groundwater replenishment, agricultural water delivery, and agricultural water drainage, kind of lump those two together. We're a sanitation district. We also produce recycled water, and we're a regional stormwater district, and we're also a conservation district. So that's what we're involved with. So I know, reading through that list, it's informative, but it's kind of hard to visualize it. So what I'd like to do is actually go through each one of those and attach some visuals to it to make it a little more, hopefully, interesting. Let's start off with domestic water. So, at the water district, we use we use the term domestic water, and we all know what that means. But for people outside the district, like, what is that? Well, for us, domestic water means drinking water or tap water, and in the Coachella Valley, your tap water, the water that goes to your home or business, is always 100% groundwater straight from the aquifer. So when we say domestic water, we mean aquifer water all the time. I'd like to show you the process, how we get this water to your home or business. Essentially, we must do the following to have a domestic water supply. First off, we must drill, operate, and maintain wells. And then this includes the pumping of groundwater. This is a well pump station here. And we pump the water out of the aquifer and put it into distribution lines like you see here. But before we can distribute it, we have to test the water in a state-certified laboratory to make sure that it's clean. Once it's been declared clean, then we can continue on with the distribution. And from here, the distribution lines can either go straight to your home or business, or if it bypasses your home and business, it'll actually continue on and be stored in an above-ground storage reservoir like this one. These are stainless steel storage reservoirs that hold domestic water. And so the water that's held in storage here can then be redistributed at a later date. You heard me say, we have to make sure the water is clean before we distribute it. And some people ask us, what do you mean by clean? What is clean? Well, when it comes to tap water, all of our tap water, all of our domestic water must meet state and federal standards for clean drinking water. And once it meets or exceeds those standards, we can say with confidence that the water is clean. Now, you heard me say that, actually, I don't know if I mentioned it, but in most cases, we don't have to treat the water at all. It's clean right out of the aquifer. It meets all drinking water standards straight from the ground. We can test it, get the green light, and pass it along, and with no treatment whatsoever. We do add a little bit of chlorine just to ensure that there's no growth of organisms in the distribution lines along the way. But other than that, there's really no treatment. The exception to that would be in the East Valley, we do have some wells that test positive for arsenic. Now, the arsenic occurs naturally in those areas, and meaning it's leached into the water from the surrounding rocks. And so we have to remove it. And we do that, you see in this picture here, this is a filtration plant. We actually have 3 of these in the east part of the Coachella Valley. It removes the arsenic and other constituents through a process called ion exchange. And it removes it at the molecular level. And when the water passes through these filters, comes out the other end, it is drinkable. And we call it clean, and we pass it along. If you're curious as to what clean water looks like, we have a water quality report that we produce. We're required to produce this report by law, and we produce one every year. It basically shows the results of our water tests, and we mail a copy of this out to our customers every year. If you're not a customer and you'd like to see it, we do have it posted online. So you just have to go to our website, CVWD.org, and do a search for water quality report. And you can take a look at that, and you can see exactly what's in our water. Okay, so CBWD today is the largest distributor of domestic water in the Coachella Valley, but it wasn't always that way. In fact, we didn't get into the water or domestic water business till 1961. At that time, we purchased several small private water companies. We started off with 1,100 accounts, and today we've grown to supply water to over 106,000 meters or accounts in the Coachella Valley. And that includes, as I mentioned earlier, 100 wells, roughly 2,000 miles of pipelines, and 60 storage reservoirs. And if I didn't mention that earlier, I just mentioned it. So, okay, that's our domestic side of the house. Let's move on to service number 2. That would be groundwater replenishment. So when water is taken out of an aquifer, it is important to replace that water. In this picture here, we see what we call a groundwater replenishment facility that is actively percolating water back into the aquifer. And by actively percolating water, what I mean is percolation is that process in nature that takes surface water and pulls it down into the soil and fills those little pore spaces between the sand and the gravel, and accumulates and forms an underground water supply that we call the aquifer. So the water gets there through the process of percolation. Currently, we have 3 sources of water that refill the aquifer in the Coachella Valley. Source number 1 is snowmelt from the surrounding mountains. Typically, we get about 62,700 acre feet of snowmelt per year on average, percolating down into the aquifer to refill it. So that's good. And then our second source of water to refill the aquifer comes from rain. Sadly, we only get 3 inches of rain on average per year here. And when we get it, we tend to get it in storms that dump, 1, 2, 3 inches of rain. We get it usually all in 1 or 2 storms, which leads to flooding and runoff, wherein the water is coming down so fast that the soil does not have time to absorb it all. So the water does absorb some of it, but we would like to see more of that rainwater absorbed into the aquifer. But it does help. We'll take it. Any bit we get helps. So the rainwater we get, the snowmelt we get to replenish the aquifer, honestly is not enough to support the population that lives here. And so as a water district, we have to import water to support the aquifer. So our imported water comes from 2 sources. A state source from the state of California for the SWP called the State Water Project, and then from a federal source directly from the Colorado River. So State Water Project from the state of California and federal water from the Colorado River. And you see the numbers there in the little graph there. It says SWP, that's State Water Project water. You can see that water coming out of these pipes here. The water coming out of those pipes is flowing from the pipes. This is imported water flowing into the Coachella Valley. And if you follow the arrows, it's actually going into that percolation area that we saw earlier, and it's allowing that imported water to percolate into the aquifer. That's in the West Valley, and the Coachella Valley Water District and the Desert Water Agency that serves Palm Springs, we have a partnership, and our combined entitlement to this state water, you can see it there, is 194,100 acre feet of water per year from the state of California. Sadly, we rarely get that. The state project water typically under-delivers. And so it does have some storage and delivery issues that we would like to see fixed so we could get our full entitlement every year. But that's another issue. And then moving down, our federal supply there from the Colorado River, we have a percolation facility in the East Valley that brings in Colorado River water, and has a capacity to replenish 40,000 acre feet of water per year in the East Valley. And then federal water in the Mid Valley. Now our Mid Valley facility is not up and running yet. It's currently January 2019. It's scheduled to be opened next month by the end of February 2019. And that facility, the Mid-Valley facility, will be able to percolate 25,000 acre feet back into the aquifer per year. So we're excited about that. Now, at this point, I would like to focus on SWP water, State Water Project water, because it does get a little confusing. To really understand this imported supply, we kind of have to take a step back and look at the entire state of California. California is the third largest state in the United States. And the problem with water in California is most of the water falls up north. In fact, 80% of the precipitation in California falls in northern California. And this turns out to be a problem because guess where most of Californians live? Yes, Southern California, where it's nice and sunny, like the desert, where there's very little water. And so huge demand for water in the south, but most of the water is up north. So to solve this problem, the state of California back in the 1960s built today what we call the State Water Project. And so essentially, here's a rough drawing of it. Actually combined two systems together just because they are somewhat interlinked. But just to make a distinction, the top area up there we call the Central Valley Project. That's actually a federal project. And if it actually starts up north at a lake called Lake Shasta. There's a picture of it. When Lake Shasta is full, it can hold 4.5 million acre feet of water. And then when water is released from Lake Shasta, it goes over Shasta Dam into the Sacramento River. And then if you follow it down, I traced out in red, just very lightly, that portion in the Central Valley, which is the distribution area for that project. And so that would include farmland in the Central Valley and also cities in that area. Now, in the Coachella Valley, our interest in this system actually starts here in the blue area. And this is the formal SWP, State Water Project. And that actually starts up here at a lake called Lake Oroville, which holds 3 million acre feet of water when it's full. So water then leaves Lake Oroville through the spillway, enters the Feather River, and then continues down, eventually joins the Sacramento River, and then finally the Delta in the central part of California there. And here's a picture of the Delta. So the California Delta, it's kind of a confusing maze of water going every which way, but it's a very important area for water. We tend to call this area the water hub of California. This is where water is, quote, wheeled throughout central and southern California. And the way it works for us is at the top of the Delta, there are pumps that actually pull water. They suck water out of the Delta, put it into an aqueduct. Looks like this here. There's the aqueduct. The State Water Project aqueduct, the formal aqueduct, is 444 miles long, and it transports water from the Delta all the way south down to a little lake down here called Lake Paris, which is actually the end of the State Water Project. Now, the reason I went through all of that is because you heard me say that Coachella Valley Water District buys water from California. The problem is that the closest point where we can take delivery of that water is here at Lake Paris, and we don't have a physical connection to that supply. If you look on the map here, there's the Coachella Valley, that's where we are. And if you look there to the left, you see Lake Paris, and what to do. How do we get the water that we purchased from Lake Paris into the Coachella Valley? Initially, it was proposed to build a pipeline. Now, that's a reasonable proposal, but when we consider the cost, if we were to build that pipeline today, we'd have to pay about $2 billion to bring that water in here. And that is too much of a cost. That is something that our district did not want to do. So what we did instead was we got creative and we looked at California's southeastern border and the Colorado River that divides California and Arizona. And we realized that, you know, there is another water district in Los Angeles called Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. And they actually operate a federal pipeline that extends from the Colorado River 242 miles through the Coachella Valley and finally ends in Riverside County at a little lake called Lake Matthews. And then from there, water is redistributed throughout Los Angeles and San Diego. So that pipeline channels Colorado River water. That is not our pipeline, it is their pipeline. We call it the CRA, or the Colorado River Aqueduct. And the creative part of this is we approached Metropolitan Water District and we said, you know, we have all of this state water that we've purchased. It's sitting over there in Lake Paris. We have no way to access it. Here's what we'd like to do. We would like to give you that water, and in exchange, you give us an equal portion of Colorado River water from your pipeline, and you turn it out into the Coachella Valley, and then we can percolate that into the aquifer. And an agreement was made, and so we call it an exchange agreement. They take our state water and put it to use, and they give us an equal portion of their Colorado River water. And again, the turnout that they built for us is here, the west end of the valley, at the pipes that we saw earlier. Again, here's a picture of those pipes. And essentially what we're looking at here is a connection, a turnout, if you will, to the CRA, the Colorado River Aqueduct, as it flows through the Coachella Valley. So when those pipes are open and the water is flowing, it enters the Coachella Valley, the west end, flows into a natural river here in the Coachella Valley called the Whitewater River. And the Whitewater River in this portion flows down about 4 miles. It actually flows under the Interstate 10 freeway through the San Gorgonio Pass there, continues down under the railroad, and then finally enters, yes, the percolation ponds. Here we call the groundwater replenishment facility. So again, we have the action of percolation in these ponds that helps refill the aquifer over time. Now, these ponds are quite large. We can't really get a picture of them all from the ground, so you have to go up to see the whole thing. And from up in the sky looking down, this is what you see. Essentially, it's a series of ponds. We have 19 ponds total here. We call at the Whitewater River, we call this the Whitewater Groundwater Replenishment Facility. And it's 19 ponds, encompasses about 2 square miles of property there. And so the water can percolate here at a rate of, it can drop at a rate of about 2 feet per day. And I believe we can percolate a maximum probably about 1,400 acre feet a day here. Or if we could do that every day for a year, we would get over 500,000 acre feet of water percolated into the aquifer here. So anyway, that is the Whitewater Groundwater Replenishment Facility. There are several facilities similar to this one in the Coachella Valley. This facility here actually, let's see, there it goes. This facility here, the Mission Creek Groundwater Replenishment Facility, which serves a city north of Palm Springs called Desert Hot Springs, actually is owned and operated by another water agency called Desert Water Agency that serves this area. But it's notable. Take a note of that. And then this is our facility here, Percolation Ponds. We call it the Thomas E. Levy Groundwater Replenishment Facility, which sits in South La Quinta. And this is that facility that percolates, yes, imported water, but imported federal water from the Coachella Canal, which we'll talk about later. But this facility has been open since about 2009, and can percolate about 40,000 acre-feet of water per year. And it's doing very well. We've had a lot of positive impact from this activity in the East Valley Aquifer. So also we'll talk more about that later. So groundwater replenishment, that's something we also do. Moving on to agricultural water delivery and agricultural drainage. The two kind of go hand in hand. So if we go back to agricultural water delivery, this is a picture of the Coachella Canal, and it is 123 miles long. It is connected to another mainline canal called the AllAmerican Canal, which, if you follow that back, connects to the Colorado River. And so this water is delivered into the Coachella Valley entirely by gravity, requires no electricity. The canal drops at a rate of about 1 foot per mile. And it was actually this canal that was intended to have been built when we were first formed as a water agency way back in 1918. So if you look at one of the things we were tasked with back then to import or to bring in supplemental water, this was what they were thinking about. They were thinking way back in 1918, we need to build a canal connected to the Colorado River to bring in supplemental water to feed the farms. And so we had a contract in hand for that water by 1919, but we had to wait 30 years for the infrastructure to be built before we could physically deliver that water to the farms. But as soon as we started delivering that water to the farmers no longer needed, for the most part, groundwater. So the farmers started shutting down their wells, and that had a tremendous positive impact on the East Valley Aquifer. We saw the artesian flows come back almost immediately from that activity. So the canal really is an important source of water for us. But one of the problems with areas that use imported water for agriculture is the accumulation of salt in the soil. So because of that, you have to have proper drainage to get rid of the salt. If you don't have proper drainage, then the salt accumulation can get so severe that that ground can become sterile and pretty much useless. Now, it turns out that because of historically presence of the Colorado River in the Coachella Valley from the turning of the river over the centuries, by default, the soils here just are very salty. And so whenever a farm preps a piece of land for agriculture, they have to remove the salts. And these salts accumulate, they never go away. They keep rising to the surface, kind of like drawn to the surface, kind of like oil from a wick candle. And just about every year, the farmers have to flood their fields or water them down heavily with sprinklers to dissolve those salts and push the salts down into a drainage system. We see here this tractor, it's actually installing a drain line into a farmer's field. It's digging the trench, installing, you can see the black tube going up and over the cab of the tractor there. That's actually a PVC perforated drain line. It goes down into the trench. The trench is covered over, and then once the field is prepped or prepared with all of these drain lines, the farmers can leach out the salts, and those leached salts will enter the drain tube and then enter our main drain line, which we're responsible for. And then in turn, that drain line will connect to a drainage basin, the Salton Sea. So some people ask if the Salton Sea is a remnant or left behind portion of that very large lake that was here 400 years ago, the ancient Lake Cahuilla. Kind of yes, kind of no. The Salton Sea, as we know it today, was formed the same way the ancient Lake Cahuilla was formed. Essentially in 1905, the river turned again, and it flowed into the valley here for nearly 2 years, about 18 months from 1905 to 1907. although the turning of the river at that point was determined to be an engineering accident from an irrigation ditch down in the Imperial Valley. And rather than let the water continue to flow and fill this area, the people living here at the time pushed the river back. It took them a while, but they finally pushed it back, which stopped the inflow of the water into the valley. And what was left behind is what we have today, the Salton Sea. And the people kind of scratch their heads over this, and they say, well, why has the Salton Sea just not dried up? Why is it not evaporated? Why is it still here? And the answer is agricultural drainage. Currently, the Salton Sea is set aside federally as an agricultural sump, meaning it's set aside to collect salty drainage water from surrounding farms. That's not only the Coachella Valley, but the Imperial Valley, and even farms in Mexico. So that is the Salton Sea. Okay, continuing on. One of our other areas of service, we call it sanitation. It's a nice way of saying sewer lines. We own and operate over 1,100 miles worth of sewer lines in the Coachella Valley. We actually got into the sewer business in the late 1960s when we took over the operations of the sewer and recycling works of Palm Desert Country Club. And from there we expanded into what we have today. And so where do these sewer lines go? Well, if you look, these sewer lines are actually connected to wastewater reclamation plants like this one here. And at the reclamation plant, we collect sewer water, we clean it, we treat it, and then we reuse it. We actually, in most cases, sell it to golf courses. And we can use this as an alternate water source to conserve our groundwater supply. Okay, we're also a regional stormwater district. Essentially, there's a natural river channel that runs through the middle of the Coachella Valley. And this is a picture of it right here. But as a regional stormwater district, we're responsible for intercepting any water coming directly out of the mountains. We intercept that water, we steer it through other channels, through the towns and the cities, and dump it into this main line, this main stormwater channel, which in turn sends it to the Salton Sea. We're also a conservation district. We have a very aggressive water conservation program that trains and encourages and rewards people to use water efficiently. This includes homeowners, farmers, professionals, landscapers, HOAs, golf course managers, and small business owners. And if you want to learn more about the cash incentives we have available to our customers and the classes we provide, please visit our conservation page on our website. Okay. So those are our 7 areas of service, and all of these services are carried out by a full-time staff of about 550 employees. And it's getting into the politics of things. It may be a surprise to hear that the water we deliver to people's homes and businesses is actually free. People say, why then do I get a water bill? It turns out that you're actually not being charged for the water, you're being charged for the service to deliver the water. The wells that we drill, the pipelines that we build, the personnel that we employ, the meters, the pumps, all of that costs money, and we pay for that, and we pass that cost on to you, the customer. So you're actually paying for the service, not the water itself. So again, as a public agency, we are regulated by the State Water Resources Control Board, and moreover, locally, we are governed by an elected board of directors, which consists of 5 members. CVWD service area exists here within 5 divisions, which are shown above. Each board member lives in, is elected from, and represents his or her respective division. Each board member is elected to serve terms of 4 years. Our board meetings are open to the public, so we invite you to attend. Typically, they're held every second and fourth Tuesday of the month. Meetings begin at 8 a.m. and alternately are held in Palm Desert and Coachella. And if you want to see a schedule, again, visit our website. Okay, thanks for hanging in there. We are almost done. I would just like to wrap it up by just giving a big picture overview of how important imported water is to the Coachella Valley. So if we start with the Coachella Valley here, there's our service area in yellow. Our service area, it covers 1,000 square miles. That's quite large. It's actually the third largest water district in Southern California. The largest water district actually is the one I mentioned earlier, Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. And they're also the largest water district in the United States. They have a customer base of about 20 million people. The second largest water district is south of us. That would be Imperial Irrigation District in purple down here. And they're also an electric company. So to show the big picture of imported water, let's start with the pipeline we mentioned earlier, the CRA, the Colorado River Aqueduct. This is that federal pipeline that is operated by Metropolitan Water District, actually ends in Lake Matthews there in Riverside. And it's one of the main supplies of water to Metropolitan's service area. Now, this isn't the only supply to Metropolitan Water District. They also receive state water from the State Water Project. As we mentioned earlier, there ends in Lake Paris. And I think I failed to mention that the connection we have here with Metropolitan Water District is Metropolitan Water District and Coachella Valley Water District. We're the only two agencies that have access to both state and federal water. And because of that, we are free to exchange those water sources freely. So we do that. And the exchange water, again, we get from Metropolitan Water District is turned out here in this red area at the Whitewater turnout. Again, there's a picture of it into the Whitewater River. And then again, there's another replenishment facility there that serves, as we mentioned earlier, Desert Hot Springs. There it is there. And then so these two replenishment sites actually create what we call an area of benefit that you can see outlined in blue here that provides water in the aquifer to the West Valley and the Mid Valley. And if you notice in the Mid Valley, that water supply is getting stretched pretty thin. And so that's a problem because what it's done is it's led to overpumping of groundwater in the Mid Valley. And so we're addressing that problem and expect to have that reversed very shortly. But anyway, just keep it in mind. Now, our other imported source here comes from the AllAmerican Canal, which actually serves the Imperial Valley. And they call it the All-American because it flows right along the border with Mexico, but all on the American side. And coming off of that canal, which is Colorado River water, is the Coachella Canal, that 123-mile branch that actually ends in the middle of the Coachella Valley in La Quinta at a little lake called Lake Cahuilla. And again, there's the Coachella Canal, and there's Lake Cahuilla where it ends there at the end of the canal. And the area benefit from this comes through another replenishment site that we looked at, the Levy facility, Groundwater Replenishment Facility, which actually puts water back into the East Valley there. So the problem with the Mid-Valley area where we have the overpumping of the groundwater there, we addressed that formally in 2008 by finishing phase one of a three-phase project called the MVP, the Mid-Valley Pipeline. And what that is, it's a pipeline about 6.8 miles long. It extends from the canal as it runs through the city of Indio up into the city of Palm Desert. And here's a picture of it. And basically, water in the canal is pulled into this pump station, and then from the pump station, the water goes into the pipeline nearly 7 miles, actually under the Whitewater River storm channel, and then continues on and up into our wastewater reclamation plant at Palm Desert, where the water is deposited into this huge reservoir. And so if you ever visit our reclamation plant here, we'll show you this big reservoir that we have. It is Colorado River water in this pond here. So the reason we did this is because the recycled water that we produce from this facility is limited. We can only reach out to about 16 golf courses. But in fact, we have about 121 golf courses in our service area. So we want to reach out to those golf courses like we did the farmers and get those golf courses to shut off their wells and connect to an alternate system. So in our case here, if they have access, they can connect directly to the canal, or if they have access, they can bring in pure recycled water, or if they don't have access to either, what we're now doing is we are taking water from the canal, Colorado River water, and we are blending it, we are mixing it with recycled water, which increases our supply, which it gives us the ability to increase our distribution. So currently we have about 54% of our Mid-Valley golf courses off of groundwater. This is good news, and we expect by 2025 we're going to have about 88%, I believe, of these Mid-Valley golf courses off of groundwater. So this is a conservation measure here. And then in addition, coming off of the Mid-Valley pipeline, we have our future and soon to be online Mid-Valley groundwater replenishment facility here in Palm Desert, which we expect to be up and running by next month, I believe, end of February. And so with the action of golf courses cutting back on their water use from the aquifer and actively replenishing the aquifer at the new groundwater replenishment facility, our Mid-Valley is going to realize the true benefit of these replenishment actions that it was intended to all along. And so again, stepping back, we can see the impact of imported water on Southern California. So it's a very important source. Okay, thank you for hanging in there. We're almost done. I just wanted to end by showing you a picture of our control room. Our control room is something we're very proud of. It's the central nervous system of the Coachella Valley Water District. All of these operations that are continually going night and day are actually controlled through a system we call SCADA, which is, we call it supervisory control and data acquisition. And so the data acquisition refers to a type of hardware that we have called telemetry. It's essentially, it's towers that we have systematically placed throughout the valley with, which communicate with our operations center through microwaves. And so these towers actually collect data and bring it into the operations center where it can be controlled and manipulated by the operators in real time, which tends to make the operations very efficient. So the system essentially runs, it can run itself, but we do need eyes and ears on the operations to make sure everything is running smoothly and to keep everything in balance. So we do have that system in place, and we've had it in place since 1965, which I think makes us one of the first, if not the first, in the nation to have such a system. So anyway, thank you for hanging in there. I think I went over my time. Hopefully you're still with us. So that is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to visit our website. You see it on the screen there, CVWD.org, or if you want, feel free to call or email me directly, and I'll try to answer any questions you have or get you in touch with the right people. Okay, thank you for listening. Appreciate you tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your day. Signing off.